Failure to act on this budget repair bill means at least 1,500 state employees will be laid off before the end of June.
That is Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin trying to explain last night why it is imperative that Democratic lawmakers return to Madison to complete the very controversial public sector union bargaining bill that he's dealing with. At the same time, Governor Mitch Daniels, also a Republican in Indiana, is saying, all right, it's okay for Indiana lawmakers to leave because collective bargaining is really not something that we want to deal with right now. It seems like two different responses, but we're going to get to the bottom of this because Byron York conveniently has written a piece on both of them in the Washington Examiner, and he joins us now. Byron, good morning.
Good morning, guys.
First question, and I hadn't really thought about this till I looked at all the stories this morning, but I couldn't help noticing all of these Democratic lawmakers fleeing Madison, all of these Democratic lawmakers fleeing Indianapolis. Where did they go? And suddenly Rahm Emanuel wins the vote in Chicago.
And you know there's something
connection
even more interesting. They head to Illinois. They're hanging out in Illinois, and today we find out that Illinois, you know, they are further behind in their pension commitments than almost any other state. And today we find out they're going to borrow $3.7 billion just to pay their pensions a little longer. So there are a couple of different ways to deal with the situation, like they're trying to do it in Wisconsin, or like they're doing it in Illinois, which is just to keep the system, keep the benefits flowing, and borrow money to pay for it.
Well, but I'm looking at what Mitch Daniels is saying in Indiana. I mean, this is a guy who has already, to some degree, limited public sector unions' ability to negotiate in Indiana. What he's talking about is a much broader measure, which I understand was trying to turn Indiana into a right-to-work state, like Iowa, which they are not. But is he right? Is now not really the time to do that?
You know, I would respect his opinion on this. He opposes this bill. He doesn't think it's the fight the legislature should be having at this point. Obviously, he does not approve of lawmakers fleeing the jurisdiction to stop the legislative process on it.
Right.
But it's something that the Republican governor doesn't support. And you're right. He says, we took these actions to try to rein in public employee cost immediately after taking office in 2005. So it's a different argument than Scott Walker is making in Wisconsin.
Well, what's the argument that Walker's making in Wisconsin? Because he said last night, he says, hey, listen, I don't want to do away with all aspects of collective bargaining for government workers, but the unions are saying that he does. So where's the truth there?
This is the argument that he's making in Wisconsin. He, as you know, he has demanded that public union workers pay more toward their own health care coverage and toward their own retirement. Mm-hmm. And it's still a better deal than people in the private sector. They've agreed to do that. So the question is, well, gee, if they've given in on the money you said you needed, why do you keep pushing this collective bargaining stuff? His argument is collective bargaining itself is a fiscal issue because they believe, the administration in Wisconsin believes, that if the unions give in on these dollar measures, they will then use collective bargaining to try to get it back.
Right. In another administration.
Exactly. And also to try to get it back in other benefits and more generous overtime provisions, more generous health care provisions, things like that. So they say that the collective bargaining, even if the unions give in on these two specific things that the governor's demanded, mm-hmm. it'll still end up costing him more. Now, whether he's going to be able to sell that to the entire people of Wisconsin, I don't know, but that's his argument.
But this is, to a large degree, a national issue as well. I mean, Governor Christie in New Jersey, Governor Kasich is about to join the fight in Ohio, and even Governor Cuomo and Brown in California, or New York and California respectively, are dealing with this. But the question I wanted to ask you is, it seems to me the difference when you're talking about public sector unions is when these guys come into public to collectively bargain, what they're almost invariably asking for is expanded government at the cost of higher taxes. That affects everyone, unlike an auto worker or a steel worker who comes in and tries to get a better deal for himself.
I think we have had a good conversation because of these issues about the question of public sector unions. And they're not allowed in every state in the United States.
Correct.
There are about a quarter of the states do not allow them, public workers, to unionize. And the thing is, in the private sector, There's an adversarial relationship between the union and the company management. In this case, the company management is the taxpayers, and the unions have used millions of dollars from coerced dues from their members to elect politicians who then turn around and repay the favor by agreeing to generous contracts with the unions. Now, Republicans are saying this is an unhealthy cycle. It cannot go on in today's fiscal circumstances, but at least I think people have taken a closer look at how public sector unions are different from those in the private sector.
But do you think the public, and by that I mean the general public, the non-union tax-paying public, is on the side of Republicans at this point?
I think in Wisconsin it's pretty close. I think the Democrats have done themselves a great deal of damage by fleeing the state. The Republicans there have told me, we think the public is with us on collective bargaining. We know the public is with us on the Democrats fleeing the state. I think if Scott Walker prevails in Wisconsin, it will be because of the tactics that the Democrats used. Now, on the issue of collective bargaining, some of the polling I've seen has people very much divided. This is, I mean, you rightly point out this is a national issue. It's going to play out in other states over time. It's not something that's going to be settled in Wisconsin right now.
All right, let's touch on the Congress and the federal level with the budgets and the big showdown we're going to have next week. What do you think the chances are of having a government shutdown at this point?
You know, it's interesting. It seems that Democrats have kind of wanted one more than Republicans.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You guys know very well Republicans are still, they still look at their scars from 1995 when they shut down the government, and it was widely viewed as a disaster and kind of a launching point for Bill Clinton's recovery after the disaster of the 1994 elections. My guess is it's probably not going to happen. I do think cooler heads will prevail on this, but I will say that Republicans, some of them, are now looking at each other and saying, that disaster in 1994, in 1995, well, in 96 we had elections and we lost only 9 seats, and we kept control of the House for another decade. Maybe we should rethink the damage that did to us.
Maybe it was a Category 1 hurricane instead of a Category 5.
Well, it's remembered among Republicans as just a complete disaster. But electorally, you have to look. No. It did not. I mean, the Democrats just now lost, 63 seats? And in 1996, after this total disaster, Republicans lost 9 seats.
The problem was not the outcomes, Byron. It was the expectations. A lot of the GOP at that point, flushed with success from 94, thought they were going to take out Clinton, and they didn't. And a lot of that had to do with his own personal charisma to offset the criticisms they made against him. I'm not sure you've got that situation here now.
Well, I think that I don't get the sense that Republicans have that sense of overconfidence or arrogance about defeating President Obama. Now that they've won the 2010 elections, next stop is the White House. I think they're kind of wary about that, which is one reason you're seeing the Republican field, which doesn't exist at the moment, hang back so much. But all I'm saying is they are rethinking this question of government shutdown. They don't want it to happen, and I think Republicans